Scientific socialism is the theoretical expression of the proletarian movement and the practical science used to transform society through class struggle. It is the dialectical materialist method of Marxist social science that aims to understand, explain, and drive society in its entirety towards universal emancipation of the workers of the world and therefore all humanity. It is dialectical because it's a dynamic method of constant social change where the contradictions within society of labor and capital collide, forcing revolutionary leaps to a higher, necessary stage of social development. It's materialist because it asserts that matter in motion underlies all interactions, not materially disconnected ideas or concepts. It's a science of social totality through the formative principle of knowledge and the criterion of truth, praxis. In this sense, it studies the interconnected whole of society, the knowledge of which is formed by interaction with the material world and forged by class struggle. It then tests its efficacy through the criterion of revolutionary practical application and is verified through its ability to manifest its predictions in the real world. It aims to destroy the inherent contradictions within capitalist society and create a new society devoid of those contradictions. For these reasons, it is the only scientific method known that has the theoretical tools necessary to understand the complexities of society and provide actionable solutions to its problems. Through the revolutionary method of praxis, scientific socialism methodologically transcends and stands opposed to the methods of positivist social science dominant today in bourgeois sociology and economics. It forges its own rigorous path determined not only to master the science of human social systems, but to bring humanity into an era of true emancipation through class struggle and the realization of a truly free society. In contrast, positivist social science erroneously applies the methods of natural science to the study of society, where it fails to take into account the interconnected whole. It attempts to isolate individual variables away from the totality of social structure, class, and capitalism, while naturalizing various elements of current bourgeois society as inevitable forces of nature. When positivist social scientists and economists falsely attempt to isolate these inseparable variables, analyze them with statistical methods, and draw conclusions from those data, they necessarily fail to capture the interconnectedness of those variables. They fail to understand why the data bears out in that way. This results in a self-affirming, circular, and bias-laden method whose conclusions are near impossible to reproduce. Scientific socialism, on the other hand, aims to dispel the illusions that bourgeois society creates and study the underlying social structure as a whole through refinement of dialectical theory and practical application. It advances not through disconnected theoretical analysis of data collected from isolated past sociological and economic events, but through the engine of society as fueled by the development of theory tested through the revolutionary act of praxis. There is only one kind of true theory in this world, theory that is drawn from objective reality and then verified by objective reality. Nothing else is worthy of the name of theory. Scientific socialism does not test its theories in a lab, nor does it rely on self-report surveys, but instead hammers out its theories against the anvil of the objective world. It then modifies those theories based on the various complex material forces it encounters and refines them to better fit those forces. Scientific socialism does not claim to perfectly reproduce microscopic sociological or economic events as positivists claim to. Instead, it maps out the inherent contradictions present within the current mode of production of society, bourgeois capitalism, then logically deduces the counteracting forces that result from those contradictions. What results is a dynamic, materially necessary solution to the problems created by class contradiction, alienation, private property, and the domination of a minority over the majority that has plagued humanity for thousands of years. These forces, if left unchecked, threaten to destroy the entire ecosystem of Earth and the billions of human and animal lives dependent upon it, while holding the majority of people in perpetual conditions of slavery and unjustified exploitation. Many Marxists today rely on positivist social science methods to understand what Marx called the laws of motion of society. They look at statistical trends and aggregate laws of social motion that use these positivist methods of natural science to predict trends in statistical data. This is totally fine so long as the Marxists understand that the conclusions that come from these experiments are merely outcomes of specific historic circumstances and not unchanging laws that hold true in all societies at all times. But many Marxists seem to downplay the totality and historical specificity required to interpret the results of these types of experiments and instead focus on the aggregate laws as the primary analytical tools to understand society. These laws are useful, but in no way do they take primacy over historical specificity, dialectical materialist interactions, and ideological mediation, which means the effect that ideology has on the data and even the framing of the hypothesis of the experiments. Praxis, which is the practical application and testing of theory, should always be the primary tool for Marxists to determine what is real and what is not in society. This is because praxis is the only tool that is able to take the totality of society into account by hammering out theoretical concepts against the anvil of history. If a theory cannot be materialized in any way through practical application, the theory is worthless for Marxists. Marxists can discover all the aggregate laws of motion in society and prove them mathematically, but until those aggregate laws are verified through praxis and used to further the gains of the working class, they remain idealist abstractions divorced from reality. Only through practical application of theory can these aggregate laws of motion be fully understood and used to progress society towards working class emancipation. These laws should never take primacy over the core methods of Marxism like class analysis, historical and dialectical materialism, and praxis, but should be used to reinforce these methods and provide theoretical grounding that can then be tested in objective reality through praxis. Remember, without revolutionary theory, there can be no revolutionary movement. This idea cannot be insisted upon too strongly at a time when the fashionable preaching of opportunism goes hand in hand with an infatuation for the narrowest forms of practical activity. Lenin, What is to be Done? From the book On Practice by Mao. Marxist philosophy holds that the most important problem does not lie in understanding the laws of the objective world and thus being able to explain it, but in applying the knowledge of these laws actively to change the world. From the Marxist viewpoint, theory is important, and its importance is fully expressed in Lenin's statement, "Without revolutionary theory, there can be no revolutionary movement." But Marxism emphasizes the importance of theory precisely and only because it can guide action. If we have a correct theory, but merely prate about it, pigeonhole it, and do not put it into practice, then that theory, however good, is of no significance. Knowledge begins with practice, and theoretical knowledge is acquired through practice and must then return to practice. The active function of knowledge manifests itself not only in the active leap from perceptual to rational knowledge, but, and this is more important, it must manifest itself in the leap from rational knowledge to revolutionary practice. The knowledge which grasps the laws of the world must be redirected to the practice of changing the world. It must be applied anew in the practice of production, in the practice of the revolutionary class struggle and the revolutionary national struggle, and in the practice of scientific experiment. End quote. Marxists must always primarily focus on the practical application of theory to objective reality. Marxists who focus too heavily on aggregate laws, such as the falling rate of profit, and abstract arguments about theoretical concepts, risk falling into the same traps as bourgeois economists do when they ignore social relations and instead focus on things like GDP and commodity prices. In summary, Marxism is a science of practical application determined by the objective circumstances in society. It can use the sort of methods that bourgeois social scientists and economists use, but only when they are used to further the goals of the working class and the revolution in the real world. Bourgeois economists focus too heavily on abstract and idealist figures that have little bearing on the objective world, but instead exist to further their own bourgeois class interests by ignoring the real social structures in society. Marxists who get caught up in these types of methods and primarily talk about these abstract figures do a disservice to the working class and ultimately act as a distraction to real social change. Please like, subscribe, and comment if you thought this was interesting in any way, and check out my Substack in the links below to find a more in-depth analysis of these ideas and get a sneak peek at some of the upcoming topics for this channel. Your support is important to me, and I look forward to reading your comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again in the next video.